In the week that was, Antigua's Prime Minister Gaston Brown was an angry man, so angry about LIAT that he skipped deliberations at the CARICUM level in apparent protest. But this past weekend, he wrote to the prime ministers of the other three major shareholder countries. In the letter, Brown expressed optimism in a reorganization plan, declaring that ultimately LIAT will rise again like a phoenix from the ashes and that we will never allow anyone or group of insular Caribbean leaders to kill this important regional institution. Brown expressed disappointment that other shareholder governments have considered it necessary to liquidate LIAT 1974 Limited without what he called sympathetic consideration of the impact of this decision on the people of Antigua and Barbuda. He claimed that LIAT's operations represent the only tangible benefit to Antigua and Barbuda from its participation in CARICUM. Brown declared that we in Antigua and Barbuda cannot abandon LIAT. LIAT did not abandon the Caribbean people. LIAT did not fail the region. It transported the region's people safely for over 6 decades. It is those who undermine it by encouraging transient profit seekers in competition that failed it. He called on the main shareholder governments of LIAT 1974 Limited to reconsider the decision to liquidate the airline and instead to give meaningful consideration to reorganizing it. Brown said a technical report already exists, and that could be the blueprint for deliberation of the reorganization. Barbados' Prime Minister, the outgoing chair of CARICUM, Mia Mottley, announced, however, that 6 airlines have already expressed interest in filling the gap being left by the dissolved LIAT. She made the announcement Friday in addressing a CARICUM meeting.
I am happy to report as chair of the community and as Prime Minister of Barbados, to my certain knowledge, that since announcements were being made earlier this week about LIAT's demise, that 6 airlines have come forward offering to fill the space. SVG Air and One Caribbean out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the chairman, I'm sure, will speak more to that. CAL, which is already an airline known to the region. Inter-Caribbean, which is an airline from the Turks and Caicos and is a successor airline to Air Turks and Caicos and has been around for over 20-something years with an extensive fleet as well. Silver, which we have asked to meet with us over the course of the next few days, and that is an airline out of the United States of America, but working within the Caribbean and between the US and the Caribbean. And of course, the Air Antilles, which is French-based, as you know, and predominantly between Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Paris, but have an interest now in working within the Southern Caribbean. We are satisfied that these 6 airlines can more than fill the immediate gap, particularly given the reduced travel within COVID.
Mottley suggested that there is no appetite for extensive government involvement in any of these arrangements.
We come to this moment not because there is pleasure in coming to this moment. We come to this moment as a matter of practical reality, that governments must focus on keeping their citizens alive. Governments must focus on keeping their economies going. And if that focus can allow others to come on board and to be able to help us carry the weight, well, my people in Barbados would tell you that I live by the mantra, many hands make light work.
St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris said in Basseterre on Friday that no formal documentation has been put to St. Kitts on a proposal going forward in regards to what could replace LIAT 1974 Limited. He said all the ideas he has heard so far are from media reports.
I should say to you, with respect to the conversations on LIAT, no formal documentation has been put before my government. And my understanding was that none was available during the meeting. At least none of the attendees for St. Kitts and Nevis was able to share any. And so what we have at best are ideas for which more substantive and substantial work perhaps will be needed if we are to convince ourselves and our population regarding where we go with LIAT and any other alternatives with respect to LIAT.
Prime Minister Harris said there are many ideas, some reasonable, others controversial.
Some of them are controversial from what we hear, assuming the accuracy of what is being reported. Some of them are very controversial among member states. So we wait for some of the heat to die down.
But the petition leader did not reveal his country's approach to the situation, suggesting a wait-and-see approach.
And when we have a chance to see the paper, when we have had a chance to benefit from the presentation, St. Kitts and Nevis will share with its citizens our perspective on the way forward.
And as you've been hearing, the issue of LIAT loomed large in the week that was, and the man who has covered this issue extensively is Peter Richards of the CMC, the Caribbean Media Corporation. We have Peter from Port of Spain on the line this weekend. Peter, tell us, what is the latest regarding LIAT and what have you been hearing?
Well, the latest we could safely say is that at the opening of the virtual 20th CARICOM Summit, both the Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley as well as the incoming CARICOM chair, that's the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister, Dr. Al Gonzalez, they are both basically qualified and confirmed that LIAT will be liquidated at some stage going in the future. In fact, in the near future, if I could put it that way. In fact, both of them have said that they have already been in talks with at least 6 airlines within the Caribbean, including one that is operating based in the United States, but operating somewhat in the northern Caribbean countries. And among the 6, it includes Caribbean Airlines from Trinidad, One Caribbean, and SVG from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So they are more or less moving towards that formation of, if you want to put it, quote unquote, a new LIAT. On the other hand, the Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown has already said that he's critical of the decision to liquidate the airline, and he's indicating that he would have preferred quote, a new LIAT. In fact, he has said that he has already asked the registrar in Antigua and Barbuda to reserve the name LIAT 2020. So they are going to be moving away from LIAT 1974 to LIAT 2020. And in that situation, what he is saying is that he has already put aside 20 million EC dollars towards the recapitalization of this new airline, and he has in train another $20 million from other investors willing to come on board.
So is anyone buying into Gaston Brown's idea about the way forward for LIAT?
But when you listen to both Prime Minister Mottley and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister, I think Gaston Brown will have a very hard task in trying to convince other Caribbean leaders that Caribbean governments should in some way get back involved in LIAT. As you know already, the St. Lucia government, Alan Chastanet, is on record as saying that St. Lucia would not be putting money in any LIAT configuration once it involves Caribbean governments or it does not involve the private sector. So that's one aspect of it. The Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister, the last time when he spoke publicly on capitalization of LIAT, when it went into problems, he did indicate that Trinidad and Tobago was not interested in putting money, but would be interested in providing technical assistance in terms of the maintaining the fleet, because Trinidad already has CAL, and CAL has its operational fleet operating out of Piaco. So basically, in a nutshell, what we've seen going forward is that the Caribbean is going to have, for want of a better word, an intense negotiation period, whereas Gaston Brown on one side will be pushing for a new LIAT to continue in whatever configuration, and on the other hand, you have the Barbados Prime Minister and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister say, no, this is something now, let's leave it now to the regional private sector people to push for a new airline.
What do you make of Gaston Brown's decision not to participate in the heads of government meeting on Friday, the CARICUM heads of government meeting?
Well, I think his decision not to participate in the session today was in keeping with his position on LIAT. In his letters, in fact, on Thursday, he wrote the three other major shareholders, that being the Dominica Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt, Gonzales in St. Vincent, and Mia Mottley in Barbados, and more or less outlining his position vis-a-vis Antigua and Barbuda's contribution to the regional integration system. Excuse. He had said over the past years that Antigua and Barbuda has been at the forefront of the development of the regional integration movement. And as a result, he could not fathom why there was a move now when Antigua was looking to recapitalize and get LIAT on a stronger footing, because he has always been arguing on the side that you have some of these regional leaders who, instead of helping to capitalize LIAT, were doing other things more or less to bring about his detriment. So his non-participation at the meeting today is, I think, a strong signal that the regional transportation issue is going to have a very, very strong, I don't want to say the word mashup in that case, but it's going to have a very strong way of dealing with Barbados, St. Vincent, probably Dominica on one side, even though Dominica has indicated that it is prepared to assist in any regional airline coming forward. And Antigua, on the other hand, Antigua has a reason to be fighting for LIAT, because you must remember, Antigua is the headquarters for LIAT. Antigua has something like 500 employees with LIAT, and that's a substantial amount of money. In fact, when you listen to Gaston Brown, the severance payment, something of in the range of 94 million EC dollars, you're looking at LIAT having to, you're looking at Antigua having to put out as much as $68 million in order to meet that severance payment going forward.
Can Antigua pull off the LIAT 2020 concept without support of any other government?
That is going to be technical. When I say technical, I mean difficult. In that, yes, Antigua would need the support of other governments going forward. Someone reminded me today that all CARICUM countries are shareholders of LIAT, but all of them are not contributing financially to LIAT. The only major contributors would have been Barbados, Antigua, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, if LIAT decides to go forward on its own, and the other countries, because Mia Mottley at the opening of the CARICUM meeting today made it abundantly clear that her country would like private sector involvement in LIAT. The former chairman, the former Caribbean Development Bank economist, has also indicated that regional transportation now should be private sector driven. So in that case, I think, as I said before, Gaston Brown will have an uphill task to get other governments involved in financing a regional airline, more so given the impact of the coronavirus on the economies of Caribbean countries.
All right, Peter, thank you very much for joining.